a little bit more about our admissions process and kind of the approach that we take within our admissions process. So, Jessica.
Thanks, Dylan, and hi to everyone else. I had to mute myself because my dog was barking, but it is great to see each and every one of you. I'm Jessica Luke. I'm the director of the Museology graduate program. And Dylan is asking me to talk a little bit about how our admissions process works. So there's a big push on university campuses right now to engage in what is often called holistic admissions. You've maybe heard that phrase. The general idea is that each of you show up in your application in multiple ways, right? And that it's really incumbent upon us to find strategies to understand who you are as a whole person. And so that's why, for example, we got rid of GRE scores because we don't really think they tell us anything terribly meaningful about who you are as a person. What we do is there's a committee of people who review all of the applications. Each one is read twice. We think that's really important. You put a ton of time into that application, and we want to acknowledge that with as many eyes as we can. And we're reviewing those applications for three things: academic potential, practical experience, and contribution that you can make to the program. Academic potential is fairly straightforward, right? It's showing us your academic track record in whatever way you can. Sometimes that shows up as your GPA. Sometimes it doesn't if school isn't really the system in which you shine. Maybe it shows up in terms of your writing skills when you're writing your personal statement or your essay. It should absolutely show up in your letters of recommendation, right? So remember that we want 2 letters of recommendation from academic references. And those are people who are going to talk about how awesome you are and how smart you are and how much academic potential you have. The second one I mentioned is practical experience. And there what we're looking for is some indication that you didn't just wake up this morning and decide, oh, I guess I'll work in museums, right? So that doesn't mean that you need to have done 14 museum unpaid internships by any means. It just means that we want to see that you have some real world exposure to things that are going to have some kind of traction in museums. Right. So, for example, I'm a learning scientist. I come to museums through the lens of learning. That's what they are for me, places of learning. And I've read applications where people have never worked in a museum in their life, but they were trained as a teacher and they taught elementary school and then realized that the school system isn't for them, but they really want to keep teaching. And they found out that, oh, there are these places like museums and community centers and libraries and environmental centers where you can do that kind of teaching outside of the school system. And so see how now all of their experience applies, right? They're just switching over context. So practical experience, show us that you've got some real world experience that you're going to bring to bear. And you can do that through your CV or resume, and also through a letter of recommendation from someone who's worked with you in some kind of context. And then finally, we're interested in the contribution that you can make to our program. We are really committed to building a robust and diverse cohort. We don't want people who all share the same perspective. We think museum studies is interdisciplinary. So we are looking for students who come to museums and to the field through perspectives that we're all going to learn from, right? So that's really about thinking through, who am I? And what do I think I can offer to the cohort that other people will learn from? That might be your something about your lived experience. It might be something about your family. It might be something about where you grew up. It might, right? There's all different ways to sort of think about that. But being really upfront as you are willing to be about that so that we can build a diverse cohort. So those are the 3 sort of buckets of things that we are looking for when we review your applications. We give everybody a score. We sit down and talk about any sort of places where the scores are really discrepant or things that we have questions about and want to talk more about. And then we make offers from there. Dylan, is there anything else you want me to say about that process before I turn it back to you?
I think that's it. Yeah, just really wanted to to re-emphasize that holistic admissions, I think, coming from a framework where oftentimes I think graduate admissions or admissions in the admission process in general is thought of as a minimum requirements perspective. And I think really emphasizing this approach to looking at the rubric and looking at you as a whole applicant.
Yeah, can I just say one more thing about that? Again, I told you I'm a learning scientist, and I think that that also really, that perspective can be seen in my vision for the admissions process too. In that if you really understand learning, you know that everyone learns differently. Every single face here on the screen, myself included, we all learn differently. And so what we're trying not to do is build a program of people who all learn in the same way, but rather acknowledge that you are going to have different needs, affordances, constraints. And so really making that clear in your application. For example, if you are someone for whom the industrial school model doesn't necessarily work, and there are lots of us, and thus your GPA maybe doesn't reflect how smart you are and the ways in which you think, then you're going to want to make that really clear in your personal statement, right? Make that argument and show me some evidence for that does show how you think if you don't want me to look at your GPA. You see what I'm saying? If you do think, your GPA is awesome, but you've also got some other things that you want us to look at and think about, again, really bring those to bear so that I guess what I'm saying is when you take a holistic approach to admissions, you all get to figure out what sort of holistic picture you want to paint for us, right? And make sure that you're drawing our attention to the things that really matter most about who you are and what you're capable of. Thanks, Dylan.
Thank you, Jessica. A lot of the things that, and why I wanted to start with this is a lot of the conversation and things that we're going to talk about, I think, are really framed by that holistic admissions process. And so I think really coming back to that as at the core, I think can really help understand what it is that we're looking for in the application process and how you might approach, putting together your strongest application. With that, I'm going to share my screen. I have a few slides just because there's a few of these things that point to specific requirements or things I want to point out within the application process. Again, generally, the things I want to cover is just quickly review and make sure that everyone has the same understanding of the application process, talk a little bit more about kind of tips for putting together a strong application. A couple of frequently asked questions that come up every year or almost every year that I hear from applicants. And then again, just focusing in on whatever questions that you have. So again, to start off, just to quickly review and make sure all of the application materials that we ask for are listed on our website. I think most, if not all of you, have started an application at this point, so you probably have seen this information, but just to be clear, we do have a number of pieces within the application, a personal statement, which asks 3 questions. Why do you want a graduate degree in museum studies? What makes you an outstanding candidate for our program? And then tell us a time when you failed at something, what you learned about yourself from that experience, and how you moved on from it. There is the second written piece is an essay. It's an analytical essay looking at the Trends Watch publication from the American Alliance of Museums, the 2021 version. And there's 5 trends presented in there. You pick one trend and analyze its significance and implications for your future as a museum professional. There's also a diversity statement. We ask for, again, 3 letters of recommendation. Strongly recommend 2 letters of recommendation from academic sources and 1 professional letter of recommendation. A resume or CV, and your unofficial transcripts. And for unofficial transcripts, if you can submit any and all unofficial transcripts that you have from undergraduate or graduate level courses, from degree seeking institutions or institutions where you were assigned grades. So if you studied abroad or you did some classes as a non-matriculated student, community college classes, anything that you have taken class of, you can submit those transcripts if you have access to them. That's great. We do not require the GRE tests, but we do, and you should upload all of these materials by our application deadline, which is January 14th. Typically it's January 15th, but January 15th falls on a weekend this year. And one of the main reasons we want to make sure you get those materials in is because we don't want anyone panicked if something happens when you're going to try and submit those materials. So so again, that's why we always recommend, if you can try and get those materials in, at least a couple days early, just to alleviate your own stress. That's ideal. You can submit your application materials before the letters of recommendation have been uploaded. So if you have all of the materials that are within your control and you've assigned recommenders, your 3 recommenders, you're welcome to hit apply once you feel like you're in a position to do so. And then you should be able to track at that point and see when those letters of recommendation are uploaded. But we do encourage you to convey to your recommenders that we would like all of your application materials by January 14th. There's a couple of other application materials that may or may not be required depending. So we do have an optional extenuating circumstances prompt. So if there's anything that you were not able to address in other sections of your application, you can address them there. Again, that's really something for if there's something that seems like an outlier within your application, something that may to you look like potentially a red flag, that you have an opportunity to address it, right? So rather than trying to fit something into a personal statement or the essay where it really doesn't feel like you can work that in easily, if there's something that is an extenuating circumstance that you need to describe, you can use that there. And then for non-native English speakers, the UW does require a demonstration of English proficiency. There are a number of different ways to do that. So I would just encourage you to look at Memo 8, which outlines all of that. You should be able to find that information both linked on our website as well as the University of Washington Graduate School application website. In terms of specific tests that they do accept, there's a number again that are listed here: the TOEFL IBT, and the TOEFL ITP Plus, Duolingo, and the IELTS language tests. Again, there's an entire policy document written about all of the different ways you can demonstrate English language proficiency. I don't want to go too deep down into it. So if you have individual questions, you can always feel free to reach out and ask me. Speaking of the university grad school application requirements, there are some minimum requirements set by the University of Washington, which we follow. So we summarize some of that on our website, but again, all of that is available on the UW Graduate School website. In general, what is required is that you have to have earned a bachelor's degree or the equivalent by the time that you would start courses in autumn 2022. You need to have earned a minimum of a 3.0 GPA for the last 60 semester or 90 quarter graded credits. There's some information about how to calculate those GPAs on the graduate school website. I already talked about the English proficiency requirements. The other thing that comes up as a question is if we have any specific prerequisites. We don't have any particular course or degree prerequisites. We do have students that come from pretty much any major that you can think of, and we don't have any particular courses that are required. I'll talk a little bit more as we get into this about some of the things that you might think about highlighting around kind of academic potential. But there's no specific prerequisites to applying for the degree. Jessica already talked about our admissions rubric. Just as a reminder, those 3 criteria that we are looking for in the rubric: contribution to the program, academic potential, and professional experience. You know, when students ask about kind of like often I get the question after we talk about the admissions rubric, kind of like, what else are you looking for? What are the things that you can say that you're looking for? And in general, I think some of the qualities that kind of weave throughout these 3 criteria, or kind of summarize through all of these things, are applicants who really have a strong understanding of our program and why this program is a good fit for you. So, as compared to saying, just pursuing a museum studies master's degree, or pursuing a graduate degree in general. Like, what is it about this program in particular that is helping you to achieve what it is that you want to achieve? We also love seeing applicants who really have throughout their academic professional experiences kind of perseverance in really pursuing something that they're passionate about, and have some kind of interest vision of what it is that they really want to do. It doesn't mean that you have to know exactly like this is the exact job that I want to do, right? But that that you've really kind of put some thought and some energy and pursued this thing that you're passionate about, right? The example that Jessica raised earlier, I think, is a great example of, you might be really passionate about education and realize through, some teaching in a formal education setting that isn't right for you, right? I think, having those experiences that are leading you towards something that you're passionate about, and kind of connecting you or pushing you towards this degree always really helps an applicant look strong across several of these criteria. Some other general tips, kind of to somewhat state the obvious, but you might have a particular strength in one or two of these criteria, and feel free to really lean into that, right? If you are someone that is coming in with having done a lot of work internships in museums and nonprofits, and a lot of relevant experiences, you really want to play that up, do that, right? Highlight that. With that being said, you also you want to think about each of those criteria: contribution to the program, academic potential, and professional experience, and think about how you can put yourself in the best light in each of those criteria, right? Because you can be really stellar in in two of those criteria and really have a strong application, but really being able to think through each of those criteria within the admissions rubric, and thinking about how you can put yourself in the best light in each of those 3 areas can really make your application the best it can be. So just real quick, like an example, if your GPA wasn't particularly high in undergrad, but you have 1 or 2 classes that might be really relevant to what you're passionate about in museums, or were able to work with an instructor that really inspired you. Again, being able to draw that out and highlight that, I think can really help you put in the strongest application possible. You make sure to proofread, have a friend, instructor, someone look through it. Other sets of eyes on your application is always helpful. Doesn't mean that you have to accept every single edit that they want to make, right? But just being able to get that other perspective and make sure that your ideas are clear and that you haven't missed anything is awesome. Is always a great tip. be really clear and specific, right? So I kind of alluded to this earlier about students that really know what it is about this program that will help you pursue your passion, right? Anything where you can be specific to uh, what it is that you are passionate about, what it is within this program that you're passionate about, or qualities that you have, right? I remember, if you say, I'm very friendly, right? That's an awesome quality to have, right? But thinking about it from the reviewer's perspective of how do we know, right? So anything that you can do to kind of give some specificity and clarity to any of those qualities or things that you want to highlight um, uh, can really help you stand out. And again, we're, reviewers are reading a bunch of these, so that specificity and that little bit of narrative can really help make your application interesting and stand out. And then, really cultivate good recommenders and getting good letters of recommendation. We have a bunch of tips on our website about cultivating recommenders. We have the prompts that we send to recommenders about what we want them to address. So really taking time to think about who your recommenders will be and working with them to remind them of deadlines, thanking them after they've submitted their application or after they've submitted the letters of recommendation, anything that you can do to really make sure that you get really strong letters of recommendation, I think is time well invested. And then finally, researching other graduate options. Again, even if you're certain that museology is the right program for you, really getting a good understanding of what other graduate programs can offer some clarity as you're writing about what it is in particular about this program that you're really drawn to, right? So having that kind of sense of a foil of something of another program might help clarify for you what it is about this program that you're really drawn to. Don't, I think we even have this one on the website from one of our alumni. Don't start your personal statement with "I've always loved museums ever since I was little." Not that there's anything wrong with having a love for museums. We're assuming that many of you probably do, although if you don't, that's interesting too. But more again from that specificity standpoint and standing out, right? To be able to talk a little bit about what it is, not just that you love about the experience of museums, but really to highlight you and what you've done to pursue wanting to work within a museum. Don't overwrite. This is, really more about trying to cover all of your bases, right? So in order to be able to present some really clear and specific ideas and examples to highlight your key qualities, if you kind of overwrite and try and cover too many bases, you won't have any room or space to be able to offer that specificity. It kind of gets back to putting yourself in the reviewer's shoes. You want to make yourself memorable, and so if you can highlight a few key features rather, if you highlight 5 key features rather than 25, right, it'll be a little bit more memorable. And then last is don't hide any. I put in here red flags. Oftentimes I feel like you're your own harshest critic. So red flag is a pretty relative term, but that really just means, if there's something, if you had something that came up, you had a rough quarter in undergrad or had a hard time, getting your footing in undergrad, and your GPA reflects that, right? Instead of trying to, hide that and hope that no one notices, to be able to get out in front of that and be able to kind of talk about maybe what it is that you learned through that experience. I think again, the reviewers will see it, and so you want to be able to but we only know what you tell us. So, being able to kind of contextualize can really help in those situations. All right. Really quick FAQs, then I would love to get to whatever questions you have. My GPA is low. What do I do? Again, the UW Graduate School requirement is the 3.0 GPA over the last 2 years. So even if your GPA is low, sometimes that might be from classes that you took before those last 2 years. And there are a number of other ways in which you might be able to you might be able to petition for if your GPA is just below that, but maybe your major GPA is above that, that you might be able to petition for acceptance. But we review every application regardless. So put the GPA into context, right? As I just mentioned, right? If there's an extenuating circumstance, let us know. I've been out of school for a while. What do I do about the academic letter of recommendation? Oftentimes when I get this, it's before someone's even tried reaching out to a professor. They said, well, I've been out of school for a while. I don't have a professor that could really write a letter of recommendation. So we do have a bunch of tips on our website about how to reach out if you've been out of school for a while and to get a letter of recommendation. So I would say first try, and there is some, and if after trying, if they still seem unwilling or don't think that they would be able to put together a letter for recommendation, please reach out to us and we can talk about what the next steps would be. I don't have a lot of museum experience. What do I do? I think this one is particularly relevant right now. I know a lot of people, we know that internships, volunteering opportunities really were hard to come by over the past 2 years because of the pandemic. So I think in particular, over these past 2 years, if you have applied for a bunch of internships and volunteer opportunities and weren't able to, tell us, right? Again, for us, it's that we really want to see that you've tried, that you're working towards this goal, that you didn't just wake up yesterday and decide museums might be cool. I might throw my hat in the ring for this graduate degree, right? So anything that you can do to kind of show that effort. And then also, again, just because it's not in a museum doesn't mean that it's not relevant experience. So any experience, any professional experience that is informing why you want to work in a museum, after school programs, nonprofit, working in a library, there's so many different there's so many different avenues of professional experiences that may be informing your decision to want to work in a museum. So highlight that context for us. And then last was, do I need to apply to work with a particular faculty member? I think oftentimes this question comes up for people that are also applying to PhD programs. So you do not have to apply to work specifically with one faculty member, although it isn't a bad idea to look at our faculty, what their areas of interest and their research is around. And if there is someone that aligns with something that you're interested in, right? It's a good indication of kind of what might be covered within our program. And it will be helpful to know that this is someone in particular that you're interested in working with within the program. But unlike a PhD, maybe a more traditional PhD program, you're not applying to directly, work specifically on the research team of that one individual faculty member. So if you don't, if you don't have to have a specific research agenda coming into this degree, you might just find our faculty might have research or specializations that are of general interest to you, and that's okay.